All right, friends, welcome to another episode of Talkin' Smack with Bob and Jack. I'm the Bob part,
And I'm the Jack part.
and we are loaded today. We've got a very important issue that we're going to discuss right off the rip, and then we have a very important guest. He's the guy who should be, by all rights, holding the gavel at the speaker's lectern or podium or whatever you want to call it, sitting in the speaker's chair in the Ohio House of Representatives. Derek Merrin was the speaker-elect coming out of the caucus in December, in which the Republicans decided with their massive 67-member supermajority who was going to lead them. And then almost immediately after adjourning that meeting, we know the story by now. We've talked to Bill Seitz. We have talked to, how many reps have we talked to just on this program, Jack? Not to mention the ones I've spoken with on the radio. We've talked to
Three or
people on
four,
the
I think, maybe
45
five.
side,
Yeah.
and on the 22 side. I've talked to Al Catrona. I have talked to DJ Swearingen. I have talked to Gary Click. I've talked to Derek Merrin. And yes, the man, Derek Merrin, is going to join us here in about 10, 12, 15 minutes, somewhere in that neighborhood, to talk about where we are in the General Assembly, what kind of legislative priorities there are, and quite frankly, Jack, I'm really looking forward to finding out what Derek has to say now that we've had a little bit of distance between January 3rd and now it's past March 3rd. We're a couple of months down the line. How does Derek think this is going, and how does he think it's going to go? So that's going to be a great conversation with the should-be Speaker-elect Derek Merrin coming up.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk with him and to ask him some questions and, really hear directly from him because there is a lot of speculation about what happened on November 16th, what happened on January 3rd, and what has happened since then. There's a lot that goes on behind closed doors in the State House. So I want to make sure that we give him ample time to talk and we'll ask him some great questions. And I also want to point out that I did invite Speaker Jason Stevens to join us tonight. And I heard early this morning that it was not going to work out for tonight. So I did have a conversation with Jason Stevens a couple of weeks ago, a one-on-one. And I'll be writing about that conversation soon. But unfortunately, he was not able to join us this evening.
There's another event going on tonight, Jack, that we should probably just point out. Not that it's anything we're going to discuss in depth, but the Cuyahoga County Republican Party, the RPCC, is meeting tonight, and they are going to have an opportunity to hear from Tom Patton, who is one of the 22, the Gang of 22, what I like to call trans Dems. I think I might be identifying that incorrectly. Trans Dem would mean that they are Republicans. Wait a minute. No, I think I'm right. I guess they do have it right. There are Republicans who identify as Democrats. They act like Democrats, so therefore. Okay, there you go. Anyway, he's one of them. Tom Patton is. And Tom Patton has not yet met with the RPCC since everything went down. He's only made a couple of statements. He's had a couple of private conversations. He did not show up when they talked about potentially disciplining him or censuring him last month. So they're having another meeting tonight. And from my understanding, this is his opportunity to come and speak to the membership there, to defend himself, to explain his actions. Why did he do what he did? Why did he vote after a consensus was the caucus voted and there was unanimous consent that they would choose whoever won the caucus vote to be the speaker, and why he went against that? Why he went against his word? Why he sold out his constituents? Many members of the RPCC that I talk to don't think he's going to show up. And when he's done talking, if he does show up, then they're going to discuss potential discipline, including censure, which could, of course, make him ineligible for things like funding from the county, the county GOP, and, of course, a public and official endorsement as well. So the repercussions of January 3rd, Jack, are still being felt, and I think they're going to be for a while.
Yeah, I think so, too. And Mr. Patton is going to run for Senate. I mean, all signs point to that. And so he's going to need support from the state party and, the county parties that comprise his district. So that is important. And, I want to point out that at one point I talked with Tom Patton and I asked him, why he didn't vote for Derek Merrin. And he said, it was kind of a game time decision, if you will. And I said, well, I heard that she didn't vote for him because of, right to work and prevailing wage bill positions that Derek has. And he said, no, that's not the case. Well, I did a records request, and that was the case. I have a text message from Tom Patton to Shannon Burns, the Strongsville GOP leader. And the text reads, Merrin bad for me. He was planning on doing right to work and prevailing wage bills. And then he went on to say that he's the only Republican that got elected in Cuyahoga County this last November
Hmm.
with a ton of labor support and money. And he said, would I have won without them? Um, so, for Tom Patton, it was about right to work and prevailing wage uh, bills.
Tom Patton, I think, is completely is being completely dishonest about that because I don't care what Derek Merrin's position on it would have been. He still would have had to whip up a whole bunch of votes in any of those cases. Derek Merrin is still, even as speaker, just one vote. He doesn't get more than one vote, so he's not going to unilaterally declare, right to work in the state of Ohio and so on and so forth. I think that's a cop out. I think there is much, much more to this, and we'll talk to Derek about that, obviously, in just a few minutes.
Yeah, I think there is a lot to it, and I think, frankly, it's going to go back to what we said in the beginning, Bob. It's people in power that want to control the people in power with money,
Yep.
and so I think these folks sold out for power and finances.
I agree. I totally agree, and I really wish we could get more of the 22 on the air or on our podcast or someplace. Tom Patton again would be welcome to join us here to discuss this and defend himself against any allegations that are being made and explain away the decision that he made and tell us why it was the right decision for the constituents and for the people of Ohio. But hopefully that'll be on another episode. But Jack, in the last 6, 7, 8 minutes or whatever we have here, I read an article today that I found very, very interesting. I don't know if you saw it. I don't know if you ever go onto this website or not, but it's the headline was pro-life activists warn Ohio ballot initiative would eliminate health and safety regulation and parental consent for minor abortions. It's this thing called the Ohio Press Network, and it's got some of the language in the pro-abortion, otherwise known as the pro-death lobby or the pro-death cult, constitutional amendment that they're going to look to push through and pass in the wake of Roe versus Wade being overturned. And of course, all of the power being given to the states now. So they have a bill called the Right to Reproductive Freedom with Protections for Health and Safety, which is a really, really good sounding bill. Everybody should be free. We like freedom. Everybody likes health. We like that too. Everybody likes safety. We like that too. We like that too. So I don't see what the problem is here. This should be a great bill, right, Jack?
Yeah, it should be. And by the way, that Ohio Press Network sounds familiar. I think they have this writer over there by the name of Jack Windsor, and I remember State Representative John Cross talking about him last week. I heard a rumor that he was in a room with about 50 Republicans and telling them, "You can't really listen to that Jack Windsor guy. Most of what he publishes is inaccurate." So, I try to get to that site once in a while, but I take it with a grain of salt.
So, Jack, tell us, though, for real, obviously
Yeah.
my tongue-in-cheek part is over here. So let's
Yeah.
talk about that just a little bit here. Give us, there's in the article that ran on your page, or on your news site, two of the provisions that were
Yeah.
contained in the amendment were highlighted. Tell us about those real quick.
Yeah, so one provision reads that every individual has a right to make and carry one's own reproductive decisions, including but not limited to decisions on contraception, fertility treatment, continuing one's own pregnancy, miscarriage care, and abortion. So this isn't only about, and by the way, reproductive health is a misnomer. It's not only about killing a child in the womb before it's birthed, abortion, but it's now dealing with contraception, fertility treatment, and continuing a pregnancy. But every individual has a right to make and carry out their own reproductive decisions. Well, isn't that interesting? So there are a couple things there that I think could be catch-alls. So when we talk about every individual, are we talking about minors? Because
Yeah.
it certainly seems that way. I know
There's
that
no age restricted listed in the language, is there? There's no
No.
age. No.
No, there's not. And I've said this in the past. The horse is already out and the barn door's broken, right? So we need to fix the barn door. And the barn door being broken in the state of Ohio at 12 years old, a child has to give a parent consent in order for that parent to have full access to medical records. So that's the path we're already going down here. So this seems to me to smack of the idea that minor girls, because only girls can have babies, minor girls can have abortions without parental consent. And I think when you start looking at these reproductive decisions, and it says, including but not limited to. I think that there is enough latitude there that we're probably talking about making, transitioning to a gender, not your birth gender, something that would be enshrined in the Ohio Constitution. So there are a lot of alarm bells going off there. Not really on our end, because when we broke the story, bipartisanship or betrayal, talking about what we'll talk about in just a few minutes, Derek Merrin not getting the speaker's gavel, but Jason Stevens, one of the things that we talked about was this amendment. And one of the State House insiders told me back then, hey, this is going to be broad language. This is going to be an amendment similar to, say Michigan, or I believe it was Nevada, or maybe it was New Mexico rather. And so it's going to be a catch-all, and it's going to allow this a woman who, let's say, has a health concern that includes anxiety or depression to abort a healthy baby. And that comes in part two. It includes language that says an individual's health, not a mother's life, but an individual's health. So broad language there, Bob. And I think there's a lot for conservatives to be concerned about.
Well, I'm going to play off of that real quick here before we go to Derek. There's another element to this that I find very, very fascinating if one wanted to pursue this line of examination. I guess I'll call it that. First of all, you notice they don't say woman. They are picking up on the vernacular of the day. No, it's individuals who can get pregnant, right? Individuals. It keeps saying individuals, individuals. It does not say women. And because it does, Jack, if the language included in the article here on the Ohio Press Network is correct, when it says the proposed amendments provisions include, quote, every individual has a right to make and carry out one's own reproductive decisions, including but not limited to, and you read this, decisions on contraception, fertility, continuing one's own pregnancy, miscarriage, care, and abortion. And since it does not identify women, Jack, does this, if you want to talk about broad language that can be ambiguous, can be molded, can be malleable, and kind of, twisted to fit your agenda, couldn't one argue that the father now has just as much of a right to decide whether that baby is aborted or not as the mother does? Every individual has a right to make and carry out one's own reproductive decisions, period. There is no baby, there is no reproduction without the participation of the father, or what they would probably call the sperm donor. The father the language is right. It doesn't say the one carrying the baby. Every individual has a right to make and carry out one's own reproductive decisions. Therefore, if a woman has a right to decide what she wants to do with her own reproduction and make those decisions, the father has every bit as much of a right. Now, I don't know if there's somebody who's going to challenge this in a court of law, but there damn well should be. Somebody needs to step up. Some dad who finds out that his girlfriend or his fiance is pregnant, and she's like, I'm not ready for this. And he says, I don't want you to kill our baby. Our baby, this is a glorious thing. This is a great opportunity. This is wonderful. I don't want to kill our baby. And if there's a dispute there, well, the Constitution says, if this amendment were to go through, that every individual has the right. Every individual has the right to make and carry out one's own reproductive decisions. Well, guess what? There's more than one person. There's more than one individual that make reproduction happen. No one spontaneously and what singularly gets pregnant. It doesn't happen. There's never been, to my knowledge, a case of spontaneous pregnancy where somebody is just sitting around having a meal, watching TV, and bloop, suddenly there's conception. There's a sperm and an egg that have met inside of her in some way, shape, or form, all by herself.
That's happened one time, Bob.
Thank you very much. Okay, but even in the divine immaculate conception. Yes, Jack, but you understand my point here, right?
I do. Sorry
this
for the
is what they're
curveball.
doing. If they want, no, it's okay. It was cute and funny, actually. But yeah, I mean, the reality is if they're saying every individual has a right to carry out their own reproductive decision, then men now are part of the equation. So let's see if they keep that language in this amendment. And if it passes, let's see if that isn't an X factor as much as you say, the health of the mother and the anxiety and the stress and everything else is, because we could have a very interesting little debate here.
We could, but I can tell you how it's going to turn hard left really fast. Males have this thing called toxic masculinity, and I'm sure that could be a threat to mom's emotional health or baby's emotional health.
Well, males also have this thing called sperm, and mom isn't pregnant without that guy. And that guy now has 50% of the reproductive capacity. Therefore, he's got 50% of the reproductive decision. That has to be taken into consideration.
No, I agree 100%. By the way, we're on the same page in the hymnal, singing from the same line, same note. So I'm just playing devil's advocate here. But do you ever think about, I don't know if you ever catch yourself doing this, that the crazy left is going to object if something like that were to be brought forward, say, in a court case. Do you ever just start pontificating about what the hell they're going to say, how they're going to object, and just, I mean, for me, it's like the polar opposite. I go, this is what common sense, logic looks like. So let's go over here. Okay, here's how they're going to object. That's how I came up with the toxic masculinity. And certainly, if you're white, you're an oppressor, and so that perpetuates the racist infrastructure and founding of this country.
Well, it increases the toxicity of the toxic masculinity. To answer your question, I think about it all the time. What is the other side going to say? I do that every day on my radio show. Everything that I present, I think about how I feel, and I think about this will be their response to it, and here is my rebuttal. And I present it that way every single day. So it's literally what I've been doing for the last couple of decades. Okay, it's 19 past, or actually 17 past, beg your pardon now. Let's bring in our guest, Jack, and I don't know if you have a wonderful paragraph of introduction prepared for this guy, but we all know who he is, and we all know what he should be right now, and that's Ohio Speaker. Take it away.
Yeah, so we're going to welcome Republican Representative Derek Merrin from Monclova Township. And Derek is the leader of the Ohio Republican Caucus. And I believe he's the vice chair of the party's funds. So the funding apparatus of the party. And he was the guy who was elected speaker in the Republican caucus on November 16th. And should have been elected speaker, according to a lot of conservatives and Republicans around the state of Ohio, on January 3rd. So without further ado, Derek Merrin, thanks for being with us on Talking Smack with Bob and Jack. How are you, man?
I'm doing great. It's good to be with you, Jack. Good to be with you, Bob. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for making the time, Derek. We appreciate that.
Derek, I want to start on November 16th. We actually published an article after the caucus on November 16th. You were the speaker-elect. You were the guy that was going to have the speaker's gavel. And there was a lot of energy and emotion after that because conservatives were like, finally, we have somebody who's not only going to stand up for conservative legislation, but really make sure that stuff gets across the finish line. Take us back to that day. One of the things that we've heard from the people who partnered with the 32 Democrats to vote for Jason Stevens is that, hey, there was no deal in caucus. There were 3 people up for election, and Derek didn't even get all the votes the first round, and he ended up winning, but only by a couple. And I didn't agree to vote for him on the third. You're full of it. Talk us through that. That doesn't seem to be the case, but I want to hear it from you. What went on in caucus, and kind of what's the standard operating procedure there?
Well, I could write a book about the 24 hours leading up to that vote. It was a very intense day. People were lobbying people hard. I was having last-minute conversations with folks. Went into the room knowing that I had a good chance to win, but it certainly was uncertain. There was a handful of people just weren't sure which way they were going to vote. And first round, I came in second place. And then the last round, I think I won, was 36-31. There's a lot of jubilation. It was a lot of relief. I took over the meeting and, we determined who the rest of the leadership would be. There was a motion to make the vote unanimous. and everyone has an opportunity to object it being reported as unanimous. Some people might just say, hey, I voted for the other guy. I object. I don't want it to be reported that way. But no one objected. They had time to object, and it was it was going to be reported as unanimous decision that we all agreed on, and that's how it was reported. So
oh, go ahead.
We left that meeting, and I had some dinner with friends, and was interviewed by the media. We sent out a press release, and went to work immediately after that, calling members and getting the house ready to go. I had a lot of employees. You have to get hired and getting ready for a legislative agenda. There's just a lot of organizational things that have to go on, in addition to still getting through the lame duck period of legislating and getting my own bills and other people's bills across the finish line.
So when State Representative Tom Patton says, "Hey, there was no vote in caucus. That didn't happen." I mean, what I think I just heard you say was that you won in either the second or third round, but ultimately you won by about 5 votes, and then there was a motion to make it unanimous. And when nobody objects to that, that means that everyone's acclimating and saying, "Yes, Derek is our guy." Is that accurate?
Yeah,
Right?
motion of acclamation. Okay. Yes.
Now, is there kind of a gentleman's agreement to even ante up and be a part of that caucus too?
Well, there's an understanding that when you walk through the door and participate in caucus, you're agreeing to the outcome of the caucus for a vote. I mean, if you don't want to agree to it, then you don't go to the meeting. But once you enter those doors and you're going to cast a vote, that is agreeing to support that of the caucus. So that's very important to understand. So right when they enter the room, you're saying, "Hey, I agree to support the winner."
Okay, excellent.
One of the things that I find very interesting about what you just said, Derek, and I think I asked you this on the radio not too terribly long after January 3rd when all this went down. But you said as soon as you got the vote, you said big sigh of relief. It's 36-31. You're happy. Then they have the motion, everything else, and nobody objected, and it's going to be unanimous. Let's go. You just said a second ago you started making phone calls. One of the biggest complaints of the 22 trans Dems, and for those who don't know, that means they are Republican by name, but they identify as Democrats because that's exactly what they've done here. They've identified with and partnered with Democrats, but their argument, or one of them, is, "Oh, well, he didn't reach out to me. He didn't make us feel welcome. He didn't foster a sense of inclusiveness by reaching out to us after the vote. In fact, we didn't hear from him for weeks." I heard that from many, many members of that cabal of 22. So let's clarify this right now, Derek. You just said you made calls. Somebody's not telling the truth.
Oh, yeah, I absolutely did make calls. And I will, on that night, I received over 400 calls and text messages. That's how many people were reaching out to me, from members to the media, to my family, to people back home. So I spent a couple of days just trying to get back to everyone. In addition, coming off a really, hard election. It's hard to have an hour-long conversation with 66 other, Republicans. But I started making phone calls and talking with people. One of the people I said, Bob, I called DJ Swearingen, who said, he was on your show and said, "It just became clear to me that I was going to be completely left out and nowhere to go." And I had a nice conversation with DJ several days after that. I actually talked to him about potentially being the chair of the finance committee. Because we agree on taxes and education policy. And I think, he would be a person I could work with well. And so I didn't offer that explicitly to him, but we were talking about, "Hey, I want to have another conversation." He said, "I want you to talk to Jason Stevens first, and you guys work something out." And I said, "Yep, talk to Jason." Jason, I believe, also had a death in his family that weekend. So I had reached out to him, but we didn't quite connect for, 5 or 6 days. So I had reached out to people. We were talking to people. I was trading text messages with people. There's all different forms of communication. Come back to Columbus, I'm talking to people in the hallways, and there's a difference between an hour-long conversation and a 5-minute conversation in the hallway. But I was, trying to get to everyone as I could. Then you have Thanksgiving, you have lame duck, you have Christmas. As you guys know, it's been reported my father went to the hospital and was in hospice for 3 weeks, from like the second week of December till the end of December. So at that time, I'm interviewing. I probably interviewed well over 20 people for positions, working with administrative staff to get the House ongoing, getting the legislative agenda round up. And then, the last couple weeks of December, I was trying to determine all the committee schedules, who the chairman would be, the vice chair, and, if you'd serve on 4 or 5 different committees. So we had requested all of those preferences from people, and I was calling people saying, hey, I'm looking at your requests. These are the 5 committees you want to be on. Let me know which one's really important. Walking through that with people and talking with people. So, I did communicate with them. So the idea that I didn't is just absolutely not correct. I mean, there are a couple people that I had reached out to that I didn't reach, and there's a couple people that I talked to Jason Stevens about. I said, hey, tell me where you want them to be at, and he said I'm going to have conversations with them. So I was kind of waiting on him to get back with me on a couple people to say, hey, this is my core supporter. Let me know. This is where I want him to go, type of thing, trying to give deference to him and his team. So there's a couple people like that I didn't quite read, I didn't have in-depth conversations with, but
so Derek, a quick follow-up to that. Take us inside your head as all of this is going on, particularly from that point before Christmas, again, when your father went into, hospice care and you got very serious family obligations and concerns and emotions, but you're still interviewing people. I think you said 20 interviews between then and the end of the month, end of December. As all of this is going on inside your head, are you thinking, I'm just building the team? This is good. You're all good to go. You are going to be the speaker. Everything has been decided. Or did you know at that time you're in a fight right now and that there are forces within your own caucus working behind your back to go and work with the Democrats and come up with this steal, this coup, whatever it is you want to call it? Did you feel going into, January that I'm good, or maybe at what point is a better way to ask you, did you realize this is not going to be smooth sailing, that they're trying to oust me?
Yeah.
They're trying to undo the caucus vote.
That's a great question, Bob. So immediately after I won, there was conversations through the grapevine like, hey, these guys might try to overthrow you in January. I had multiple people that were working for me that were talking with other members. So, it's one thing for me to talk to them. It's hard for me to say, hey, are you going to overthrow me or not, or even try to admit that would be a possibility. So I have other people connecting with these people and, getting 3 different stories from them. So I felt pretty good about how that was going. Most of those guys said, hey, we're not happy Derek won, we lost, but it's fine. He'll be speaker for 2 years, and we'll never do that to you guys on the floor of the House. We're not going to betray Republicans. So I kind of felt okay the first 10 days, 2 weeks after the vote, although I was hearing it. I thought there was maybe about 10 people that, could do such a thing as, siding with the Democrats. I didn't think they could get an additional like 8 or 10. And that, I guess that would have been, a mistake on my part. They kept working on it. It really started, I felt like December, like the 3rd week of December. I knew they were really working hard at it. And it's actually when my dad went into hospice, and I was really at that point I was really working hard. I was on the phone constantly trying to talk with people, strategize, trying to get to these folks. I mean, you got to understand, this is like Christmas Eve. I mean, it's Christmas, it's, almost you call people, you're bothering people. And so, yeah,
Derek, I apologize for the quick interruption here, but when you say you were on the phone trying to strategize, you mean with your supporters, hey, they're doing this, they're moving against me, how do we stop it? Or are you on the phone with them and saying, what the hell are you doing? What's going on here? Are you thinking of not supporting me now after our caucus vote? Like, who did you talk to? The pro side or the guys who were coming for you?
Yeah, both. Okay.
Both.
So, there was, by the 3rd week, I was pulling up my calendar here to make sure I get the dates right here. By the 3rd week, 3rd week of December, that's the 19th through the 23rd, there was probably 7 or 8 of these guys actively making phone calls against me. Okay. So they had already turned on me. Yep. So I didn't, a lot of those I just let go because, they were already down that path. There was no way to get them. There was no way to get them back. All right. And those are the same guys, Derek didn't reach out to me. It's because, they were, how many times am I going to reach out to you when you're making 5 phone calls a day against me saying, hey, we need to, overthrow Derek on the floor. So, I was strategically going after someone. I was trying some people. I was hoping I didn't even have to, personally engage that much and show that I was worried and concerned, because the more worry or concern I show, that just lets them know, hey, Derek's actually vulnerable and get beat. You want, the idea that you're not going to get beat. But yeah, my folks were working on them. I was working on people. And then I was also talking to people all about these, committee assignments and, showing that I was a leader and getting things out.
Well, it's interesting. I talked with several people over the Christmas holiday who were going down that path, and I heard a lot of red herring arguments. He's not calling. Well, we found out that was not true. In fact, I have a text message that you sent to Jay Edwards asking him to get together, and he kind of blew it off. He just kind of sidestepped it. Um, the other thing that I heard was, well, Derek just isn't really organized. He's not really getting it together. I talked with State Representative Jenna Powell, who said, you know what? He actually had it together more than anyone that I've worked with in the past. So, those are red herring arguments to me. That's what I classify them as. Now, we're going to get to in a minute the deals, the deal or no deal conversation. But before we even get there, these are red herring arguments. What's the real deal? Derek, why did they do it?
Power, greed. That's why they did it. The Democrats did it for a couple of different reasons: abortion, school choice, power.
Okay. And do you want to go deeper into that cesspool of when you say power and money? Are we talking lobbying firms? Are we talking? I mean, what does that look like?
Well, every state representative wants to be influential. They want to feel like they have power and they have influence and they have status. Okay. There's different ways you get that, and some people feel like they're not in power making decision if they're not a chairman or if they're not in leadership or if they're not the speaker. There's a lot of different ways you can be influential in the legislature. You can just do that by introducing bills and doing a good job there. So, when I won, a lot of the people that worked against me, they felt like, hey, they wanted to be in charge. They wanted to hold all the positions, and they weren't content to say, hey, we legitimately lost the election. Let's be content for 2 years and let's try to help push a really good agenda. And in 2 years, we'll come back and our group will try to be speaker, take the gavel ourselves or have our team. So really, they just couldn't wait for 2 years and respect that they lost a fair election. And every individual has their different reasoning. That's why it's hard to put it, make these blanket statements. I could go through each individual person and give my perspective on why they did what they did. They all have a little different reasons, but it's about their side wanting to win. And the thing is, we're supposed to all be on the same side. I was going and I've always treated, the people that voted against me, I've always had good relationships with them. I contributed money to their campaigns. Some of them contributed money to mine. I went door to door for them. I've campaigned for them. I've helped them with legislation. I've always, tried the best to, be polite and have, working relationships with people. And I felt like a lot of the relationships were deeper than a professional relationship. I considered them my friends. If they needed help, I would be there for them. If I would personally enjoy them succeeding. And I thought many of them, would be glad that, I was succeeding and, would take, you have a true friend is when a friend is excited that you do well. And I thought several of them should, be happy that, I had 2 years to be the Speaker of the House. And so, but that wasn't the case.
So, Derek, and thanks to everybody who is tuning in to watch or listen to Talkin' Smack with us this evening. Derek Merrin is the guy who should be holding the gavel. What's the difference between Derek Merrin and Jason Stephens? I've had people who are strong, and I mean rock-ribbed conservatives, who were really upset by what happened to you, but not terribly upset by the outcome because they said Jason Stephens is a real good, strong conservative. Now, I don't know him that well. I kind of question that analysis given the fact that his very first act as a supposed strong conservative is to stab a whole bunch of conservatives in the back from a 67-member caucus and their 5 million collective constituents who supported them to be in that Ohio State House. And the fact that he now is partnering with 32 Democrats to advance a Democrat agenda that they had no hope whatsoever of advancing with their super minority in the caucus, or excuse me, in the House. So, Derek, how would you define the current speaker and the guy who organized and orchestrated this speaker steal of 23?
Well, I think a conservative would have been happy to say, hey, Derek's going to do a good job. We need to provide him and his team a full support. If you truly believe in lower taxes, hey, we know Derek's going to push for lower taxes. If you believe in school choice, Derek's going to push for school choice, limited government, protect the unborn, protect the Second Amendment. So, the fact that he did not, want me to be speaker, that his primary interest was not to see a conservative agenda, pass. The two big things about the deal is, number one, a lot of this was for the Democrats about abortion. They want abortion enshrined in our Constitution. One way to potentially make that more difficult is to pass a constitutional amendment requiring a 60% threshold for all issues that change the Constitution to be put in the ballot. They were afraid that I was going to push a constitutional amendment on the ballot in May to get that 60% approved, and then that would make it very difficult for them to enshrine abortion in the Constitution. So the Democrats wanted to know, Derek, are you going to support that or not? And I remember, Jack and Bob, when I was asked that question by Allison Russo, it happened really quick. I thought to myself, you know what? I answered this question wrong. It might cost me being the Speaker of the House. At the same time, I thought, I can't turn my back on unborn babies. I'm not willing to do that. And I kind of, said, hey, I don't know where all of our caucuses are going. Our caucus members are going to be. We got to have 60 votes. But I'm generally supportive of the issue. Okay. I believe the other side said, hey, we're going to block the 60% constitutional amendment in. We're going to give you a free shot at the Constitution. So, some people are pro-life, Bob, but it's their number one priority, or it's their 480th priority. It's like, how much do you care? Everyone says they care about something, but how important really is it to you? So, abortion's a big issue. The other issue was school choice and the backpack bill. I'm a vocal supporter of the general concept of the backpack bill. Jason Stevens is more in the traditional public school camp, and the Democrats want to see the backpack bill stop. So, hey, Jason will be better on education issues than Derek will be. So, we have that issue. And this isn't, so those are the two main issues, but there's a whole litany of issues. I mean, this is kind of like a marriage. Okay. It's 32 Democrats, 22 Republicans. And I love when people say, oh, the Republicans are still in charge. Think about this. If you have two groups of people, one with 32 members and one with 22 members, what group do you think that's more powerful? The 32 or the 22? All right. I mean,
100%.
You don't have to be a CPA. You don't have to be a CPA to figure this one out. So, I mean, it's,
even better if you're doing the math thing there, Derek, Merrin, there's 45 Republicans and there's those 22 Republicans who are deciding. They literally have a choice. They can go over and give that, that answer to your question of who's really running things, let the Democrats do it with their 32, or they can say, we're still Republicans here. We should probably side with what the 45 says, the majority, which is exactly how our Democratic Republic is supposed to work, I thought. So,
yeah.
So Derek, last question on this issue is because abortion is so important. I thought what you just said is profound too, whether it's your number one issue or your number 480 issue. There are a lot of pro-lifers, but let's talk about the language in this proposed constitutional amendment. Jack's publication, the Ohio Press Network, just reported on it today. The language is extraordinarily important here because it is about so much more than just abortion. As they talk about reproductive rights, as they talk about fertility treatments, as they talk about miscarriage care, and they have enough malleable language in this that it can really, really go into a lot of different directions. And some of the states that we have already seen that have put their amendments up on the ballot already, and we're talking about New York and we're talking about Minnesota and a number of others, go even further than this. But this is going to essentially codify abortion in the Constitution, literally all the way up through the ninth month. But it does so much more than that because, again, it allows an open door for a whole lot of other radical extremist ideas related to sexuality and related to procreation. So how concerned are you about this amendment? That's number one, and all of its other, derivatives, if you will, or the language in it. Number two, do you think they're going to try to push that through this year? Because many people think they're going to sit on this, raise money, and push it through in 24 when they will have the double impact of driving massive voter turnout on the abortion issue, and then, of course, getting their president or their candidate for president to win Ohio, Sherrod Brown, in the Senate seat, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot there, and I know it's a long question.
First, I oppose the amendment. It's a radical amendment. It's abortion on the demand. It's abortion basically with absolutely no restrictions. up until the birth of the mother. And the majority of Ohioans actually do not support that type of extreme, law. Second of all, I do believe they're going to get it on the ballot in November. They're collecting signatures right now. That's the goal. And, I'm very concerned about it. I mean, once you get something into the Constitution, it's very difficult to get something out of the Constitution. Think about like the gambling, so say someone wanted to get gambling out of the Constitution. I mean, it's pretty difficult to, once the casinos are set up. So that's just one illustration. Sure, they would love to use it in the 2024 election with Sherrod Brown and the other races. But I think their biggest thing is they want to make sure they win on this issue, and they're going to win on it as quickly as they can. And before the legislature maybe passes something that, makes it more difficult for them.
Okay.
Do you think that it will pass? Do you think that they will succeed if they try to get it on the ballot in November?
In other states, they've succeeded.
So let's go to this question of a deal, and this might be a little bit of inside baseball, but I think it's important. So what I heard when I was writing the story, Bipartisanship or Betrayal, that talked about the coup of 22 and the speaker steal of 23, was that the Democrats got in the deal that the resolution that would require 60% would either stall or get killed. That there would be some sort of watered down education choice, but not the backpack bill. That there was not going to be any aggressive anti-LGBTQ activism work done, and that the Republicans would work closely with Democrats ad infinitum, and that they would allow Democrats to cram the budget and then also give them a lot more favorable treatment in redistricting. Now, be patient with me here because I'm going to say something. It seems to me if there wasn't a deal, it's pretty fortuitous or I guess coincidental that, wow, the resolution it didn't get done before February 1st with, by the way, a super majority of Republicans, 31 of
or
33,
brought to a vote,
or brought to a vote,
brought to a vote, completely stopped, not given a chance at all.
Okay. So that's fantastic information. They didn't even start the process, essentially. And so then the other issue is, well, if they're going to cram the budget, what better way to do that than have 31 of 33 members of the finance committee be people who voted for Jason Stevens? So, you start looking at these things and then you go, I hear them saying, because I talked to Jason Stevens, he said, no, there was no deal. There was no deal. So was there a deal? And I'll ask you that squarely and flatly. Was there a deal?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly an understanding. Okay. And this is an issue with the education issue. The Democrats know where I stand on the issue, and Jason Stevens, they know where Jason Stevens stands. So when Jason was probably talking himself, or he had another person talking for them, they're saying, hey, listen, Derek's for the backpack bill. Jason Stevens won't do this. Which one do you want? And of course, the Democrats were like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. We don't want school choice. So it's not just about, an explicit deal, but it's like, these are what these guys believe. And, we got different sources. We got multiple Democrats talking. You got all different types of sources. And putting everything together, I think it's pretty clear there was a deal.
Do you think
and here's the evidence. Jack, you're just laying out the evidence. Okay. The biggest thing they've already won on is a 60% constitutional amendment. They've won on that. They are certainly working together. They got rule packages that favor the Democrats. They got staffing things that favor the Democrats. They've got priority bills that are jointly sponsored with Democrats. We'll find out very soon with backpack bill. It needs to be in the budget. We'll see if that's in the House passed version of the budget. It most likely will not be. We've got Gary Click's SAFE Act and Jenna Powell's, Save Women's Sports Act. We'll see if they pass those. They might actually pass one of those. They might pass one of them, maybe two of them. But and then you'll see in the redistricting, he can't control the entire redistricting process, but he has a voice in it. So, yeah, everything that they've had every time. Okay, we just passed the transportation budget. They had all the Democrats support it. They were actually, this is something else, Jack. The Democrats were posting a tweet on Twitter encouraging Democrats in Ohio to contact their Democrat representatives to support the Republican transportation budget. Okay, this is phenomenal. So, there's some good things in the transportation budget. There were some, I had some stuff in there, but the point is the Democrats are from the transportation budget, very, very influential in what's going on.
Derek, what kind of a relationship, if any, do you have with the governor? And the only reason I ask that is I don't put anything past him. I think he has governed more like a Democrat than a Republican. I thought what he did during COVID was absolutely criminal. I thought it hurt students, it hurt businesses, it hurt workers, it hurt people. And I feel like he might be somebody who would have an interest in the outcome of the speaker's race. And I feel like he might be much more satisfied with a speaker like Jason, who is making deals with and establishing relationships with Democrats. So did you have a relationship with him, and do you think that got in the way at all of your ascension to the speaker's chair?
I do have a relationship with Governor DeWine. Let me put it this way, Bob and Jack. When I was campaigning for Speaker of the House, one of my central things to all our members was, this is what I'd say. I would say, the legislative branch is the weakest branch of government. Okay. The executive branch is stronger than us, and the judicial branch is stronger than us. Okay. Everyone believed it because we went through COVID where we had the court systems draw on our own districts. You went through the COVID stuff. It's clear that the legislative branch was the weakest branch of government. In addition to that, then I would follow up and say, not only are we in the weakest branch of government, we're weaker than the other chamber. We're weaker than the Senate. Okay. So everyone knew and thought, hey, we're going to elect Derek, and at least we'll keep it even with the Senate, and the legislative branch will become what it should be. At least an equal branch of government, probably the most powerful branch of government. So that's what a lot of people were excited about, is we were going to have a supermajority, and if we can, have continuity and get our groups to stay in line in the Senate and the House, we would have the ability to, override vetoes. And if you have the ability to do that, you can effectively, pass, whatever bill, you want to pass. And that's why another reason, talking about the treatment of others, for me to even really be a powerful speaker, I knew I needed the 60 out of 66 votes ultimately, because I needed those people to vote for an override. So I didn't want anyone to be upset with me. I wanted everyone to have a good relationship with all our members, because I knew I couldn't lose, more than 7 on them if I really wanted to do an override veto. I also knew of the constitutional amendment that was coming up. I knew I needed 60. So every speaker in that situation is going to do everything they can to be nice and, bring everyone together. And that's what I was trying to do. And that's what I would have done as speaker, not just because it's the right thing to do, but because that's how you ultimately get things done and increase the power.
Do you think that you're handling the situation that way has been bastardized? Because one of the things I've heard is, hey, Derek Merrin was reaching out to Allison Russo and he was going to make a deal anyway.
Yeah. Well, I believe the Stevens camp was talking to Allison Russo long in advance to me talking with her. And I just talked to her probably I had talked to her about administrative things right after November 16th. It was really that last week where, I knew she was being lobbied hard, and I did communicate with her and tried to convince her to stay out of the speaker's race. I knew that if I was going to get in a race of, who are the Democrats going to choose? Are we going to support Derek? Or are we going to support Jason? I mean, I knew I was going to lose. I was hoping I wouldn't lose every single one of them, 32. Ultimately, that's what happened. But I mean, I communicated with her and tried to convince her to stay out. I tried to convince her that, we had 50 votes, and even if she came all in for Jason Stevens, I was still going to win. And when I was trying to convince her of that, I did have over 50 votes, not by a lot, but I did. So I was being truthful with her, and I'm not going to. The weaker I sound over the phone or in the final days is only going to encourage my opponents to, double down and say, hey, Derek's really, worried. So, I kept a brave face up and, fought to the very end.
So Derek, I want to follow up on something. I want to talk about pettiness. And that's as a result of this discussion and this debate and this battle, if you will, this feud over Justin Pazzulli. While that appointment has kind of caused a little bit of strife, a little bit more strife, many people saying it really kind of exacerbated the battle between Stevens and his camp and Merrin and his camp. As if to underscore that, did I read it correctly that Jason Stevens removed you from your seat in the front row of the chamber and put you all the way in the back, quote, according to news reports, next to the Democrats, end quote, that he is partnering and making deals with. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, that's true. So on January 3rd, as the incoming speaker, I placed everyone where their seat was going to be. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And there's one Republican seat that has to sit next to a Democrat. And there's another Republican seat by that's technically on the Democrat side, but not sitting next to the Democrat. So there's one seat that a Republican has to sit next to a Democrat. And when I took over, I placed all the Jason Stevens folks and my folks, where I thought they would be. I left Jason where he was at originally. He had a good seat. I believe it was in the back row. I let him stay there. I wasn't playing around and, trying to give him a bad seat. Typically the seats up front are not good seats. You'd prefer to be in the back. But you don't want to be on the Democrat side and the only Republican, sitting next to the Democrats. So yeah, that's where he put me. He put me as the only Republican next to the Democrats too. You have to ask him why he did that, but it's intentional. And
how did you feel about that? How did you react when you saw the new assignment?
I was a little surprised because, like I said, Bob, I had the opportunity to do that to him.
Yeah.
Okay. I had the opportunity to say, hey, I'm going to be speaker. I'm going to take all your guys and put them in the worst spots. And there's really not a bad spot. It's an honor to be in the legislature, and I didn't do that. Okay. Because that's really not the type of person I am. And that's not the type of relationship that I have. And I know that's not in the best interest of unity. Okay. You want unity. You don't mistreat people intentionally. I thought at this stage he would try to do everything he could to, reconcile and, try to temper the flames down a little bit, but he didn't. So, is what it is.
Interesting.
So I'm gonna stay on the Justin Pazzulli situation, but I'm gonna look at it in a different light. He was allegedly going to replace Brian Baldridge. Brian is the director of the Ohio Department of Agriculture now. And my understanding how this went down is that Speaker Jason Stevens put together a group of people to select the replacement for Baldridge. And you had asked to be a part of that group. You are, according to the 45, the leader of the Republican caucus. And so you and your closest advisors wanted to be a part of that process. My understanding is that Jason did not honor that request. And consequently, Justin Pazzulli didn't have the votes that he and his fiance actually came to the State House the day that it was considered. And Jason Stevens said, well, we had the votes, but we wanted it to be a supermajority or unanimous. So question number one, did he have the votes? And I guess question number two is what happens next in that situation? And then is it going to be kind of a replay as you consider a replacement for Chris Jordan, who unfortunately passed just over the weekend?
Yeah. So number one, he did not have the votes. We allowed Stevens to do his own screening committee. I could have done one myself, but I was trying to have peace and a little bit of deference. We invited Justin in to screen and introduce himself in front of all our folks, along with 3 other individuals. Justin originally committed to being there and said he would be there, and then at the last minute said he had to work. Although the day previously he said he called his employer and they said he could come the next night, but then apparently that changed within 24 hours. So he did not screen before our committee. Which certainly didn't help him. But, he may have answered some of the questions, not well, and that wouldn't help him either. So, we screened the top 4 that effectively the screening committee, had interviewed, and he didn't have the votes. He needed 33 votes, and he was multiple votes short, which I don't think has ever happened in the history of Ohio. Wow. So his name and resolution was on the floor of the House of Representatives. This didn't need to get to that point. You need to make sure you have the votes before you put someone on the floor like that and, effectively embarrass someone.
But that's what they did. And Derek Merrin is, again, a very, very, Derek, I'll just tell you your face. I told you this when we interviewed on the radio. You're a very classy guy. a lot of people who went through what you went through, you were told you're the speaker. You won the caucus vote. You spent the next, month and a half planning that very, very carefully, reaching out, establishing relationships, talking about positions, not necessarily negotiating, but figuring out who fits where on committees. The whole 9 yards are ready to go. And then you find out they're doing what they did. Then they actually carry it out on January 3rd. A lot of people would be bitter. A lot of people would be angry. A lot of people would be screaming like Bill Seitz. He won. He's on the side that pulled this off, and he's still pissed at the world. But you're not doing that. You're being a true conservative. You're trying to think about what's best for the party. Not in this order. I say party because it's the party that kind of had the schism here. But you're thinking about what's best for the people of the state of Ohio, what's best for the House, and yes, what's best for the party in terms of using a 67-member majority, supermajority, to the best of its capabilities. That's what you want to do, even if that's not really possible now because of what they've done. So I just want to thank you, first, for being here, but second and most importantly, for being the guy that I think everybody in the state of Ohio, when they found out you were going to be the speaker, thought you were. That you really are a first-class person and a conservative and a person who values the position that he's in right now. Rather than being bitter and angry, you're approaching this in a way that I guarantee you're a better man than I am. I'm a bitter guy. I would be all over this and I would be taking some heads, man. But this is why you're there, and I want to thank you for doing that because it kind of justifies and validates for a lot of us the reason we were angry and upset on your behalf. So thank you for what you're doing.
Well, I appreciate that, Bob. And this has been a very difficult time for me personally. And, the death of this was also done when my, father was dying. So it's been a terrible 2 months. I'm not a perfect individual or certainly a perfect politician. I have an obligation to, represent my district. I have an obligation to stand with my colleagues that are still in the House. One of them said to me, I was discouraged one night on the phone, and they said, we stood up for you, Derek. We fought for you to become speaker, and we need you to fight for us now. And I'm not going, and that's part of the reason I'm doing this. I'm not here to, I get any joy of saying, hey, I'm the chair of the Republican caucus, or I'm the House Republican leader of a rival group. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of criticism. But, I'm not going to stand by and allow my colleagues who voted for me to be speaker, who are great conservatives, to be run over by a bunch of Democrats and a bunch of other folks that don't honor the caucus vote and are censored by the Republican Party. I'm going to stand with my friends. I'm going to stand with the conservatives. I want to fight for unborn babies. I'm going to continue to fight for lower taxes. I want to fight for limited government. I'm going to fight for the legislature. And I am going to fulfill my final 2-year term that people elected me to do. And I'm not going to quit. My parents taught me better than that. And you just can't, when things don't go your way, you just can't, take your ball and go home. You got to deliver. And, a lot of people, thought I was going to go home. There's some people trying to make life very difficult for me, to discourage me and say, hey, pack up. The thing here, Jack and Bob, that you guys don't know me very well. Most people in Ohio don't know me very well. There's a reason I became Speaker-elect of the Ohio House. And that is because I'm stronger than most people in the Ohio House of Representatives. I got more energy, I got more experience, and I got more friends, and I got a lot more supporters. And I'm not going to quit because I believe at this time in history, I was the person to best lead the Ohio House. So received an enormous amount of support from people all across Ohio to continue fighting. I hear you. You have righteous anger. And believe me, I know what's going on.
Let me just wrap this way, and Jack can wrap too. You're right. I don't know you very well. Neither did Jack, and neither did most Ohioans. But I do know a lot of conservatives. And my phone blew up with conservatives saying, Bob, Derek Merrin won. Derek Merrin won the caucus vote. We're going to have a true conservative speaker now. We're not going to have any more of this rhino wishy-washy garbage. He's going to be in charge of a supermajority in the House. We already have a supermajority in the Senate. DeWine can't do any nonsense now and override them. This is going to be great. And I trust those conservatives who told me that. So I was thrilled, even though I didn't know you at all at that time. I trust the conservatives that I do know in the state. And Derek, like I said, I think their faith in you and their excitement over your victory in that caucus vote was very well placed. And again, I appreciate the way you're handling things, Jack.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks, Derek. I know that you've got a lot on your plate, and I know it's been a difficult time for you. And thank you for handling a tough situation with grace. Thank you for spending time with us tonight and really educating our viewers on what really happened. I think that's important. A lot of people rely on us to give them a pulse on what's going on in the state house and throughout the great Buckeye State. And you did a fantastic job of bringing everybody up to speed tonight. So thank you for investing time with us.
Thank you for having me on, gentlemen. Thanks a lot.
We'll talk again, Derek, on the radio and on the podcast. I look forward to that too. Thank you, Derek Merrin.
Love to do it.
All right. So, Jack, just to kind of put a cap on this, I meant what I said to him. I got hit by a lot of people. You probably did too. And working in Columbus the way you do, you probably know a lot more people than I do who are conservative, who are thrilled when Derek Merrin won that. And as soon as they told me about him and gave me a little bit to investigate and a little bit to look into, I was equally excited. This is a great time to really make the turn from being a useless red state to an actual functioning and accomplished red state. That's what I thought we had in front of us. And I've gotten to know Derek a little bit since that time, obviously, and I'm very, very amazed, really, quite frankly, at how chill he is being about this whole thing. I would imagine there might be some dents in the steering wheel a little bit from when he's privately thinking about all of this, right? I mean, but
Yeah.
he does not show it. He wears the face right publicly, and he's doing things, I think that the constituents really thought he would do.
Yeah, and he's handled it with class. I got a ton of calls just as you did, and I actually got a ton of calls as we got closer to that January 3rd date. People were extremely concerned, and all I really
I
I have
got
two
those too.
things. I have two things to say. It is unfathomable, and I don't care what side of the spectrum you're on, but just a logical person looking at this says, okay, we have Republicans at the executive level, we have a Republican Supreme Court, and we have a supermajority of Republicans in the state house. And you know what's going to happen? We're going to have an abortion amendment in our Constitution that allows for the abortion up to 9 months and really protects some radical things. I mean, that's all a reasonable, rational person needs to hear to understand that in Ohio, Republicans keep up appearances. They don't keep up principles. Speaking of principles, the Freedom Foundation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just to really follow up on what you just said, Jack, and when the Ohio Constitution has the right to abortion up until literally, with no deadline. It's just at any time during a pregnancy, all the way up through moments before the birth. When that does become law, and when all of the different language that you talked about becomes law, and it's all, the feeling of the mother, there's some anxiety there. That's a health issue, and the health of the mother matters. You can do this. When that happens, Jack Windsor, I want the death of every one of those preborn babies to be on the heads by name of Jason Stevens and 21 other Republicans who are trans Republicans who identified with and partnered with the Democrats, because they will be the ones who are responsible for it happening. I'll leave it there.
And I will concur. Hey, real quick, I want to thank the Freedom Foundation. Go to the freedomfoundation.com and check them out. They are the creators of Opt Out Today. Opt Out Today is the #1 tool to free government union employees from union bondage. It allows them to make sure that money doesn't come out of their paycheck to support the things that are going on with unions. And you can read between the lines there. You know what those things are. But go to thefreedomfoundation.com. If you make a 501c3 tax-deductible donation and you put Talkin' Smack in the notes, they'll double it. So thank you, Freedom Foundation, for your support making Talkin' Smack with Bob and Jack possible.
Thank you, Freedom Foundation, and thank you, Freedom Warriors, who like to watch and listen to Talkin' Smack. We appreciate you being a part of this. Thanks again to Derek Merrin. I'm Bob.
And I'm Jack.
And we're talking smack again next time. We'll see you then.